There is a moment in British motoring history that is almost impossible to fully explain to someone who wasn't there. A moment when the great marquess of these islands, Jaguar, Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Daimler, Rover, and Aston Martin, were producing saloon cars so extraordinary, so deeply considered and so utterly assured of their own identity, that no modern luxury car, regardless of its price or its technology, has ever quite managed to replicate what they delivered. The 1980s. A complicated, turbulent, brilliant decade for British industry. And yet somehow, against all probability, it produced 10 saloon cars that stand today as the high-water mark of a craft that simply no longer exists. Stay with us, because the car at number 1 will genuinely surprise you. Before we begin, if you love the stories behind great British cars, the engineering, the history, the culture, and the characters who built them, then Britain Rewind is exactly the channel you've been looking for. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because we publish videos like this daily, and you won't want to miss a single one. Now, it would be easy to simply list these cars and move on. But the numbers and the nameplates alone tell only half the story. What made these particular saloons so remarkable, and so irreplaceable, was the philosophy behind them. In an era when British industry was under enormous financial pressure, when factories were struggling and brands were being passed between owners like unwanted property, the people building these cars somehow maintained a standard of craftsmanship and engineering ambition that the rest of the world could only observe with admiration. The real story here is not just about the cars. It is about what British engineering excellence looks like when it is truly fighting for its life. Number 10. Rover SD1 Vitesse. Launched in 1976 and revised spectacularly in 1982, the Rover SD1 Vitesse was built at Solihull and later at Longbridge, and it was arguably the most misunderstood luxury saloon of its entire generation. Beneath its sleek, Italian 8-hatchback body sat a fuel-injected 3.5-litre BIC-derived V8 engine producing 190 brake horsepower, giving it genuine performance credentials to match its handsome lines. On the road, the Vitesse felt alive in a way that surprised drivers accustomed to the sedate pace of British luxury. It was quick, sharp, and communicative. Inside, leather seats, walnut veneer, and deep pile carpeting created an interior of genuine quality. Its buyers were ambitious professionals, business owners, and the occasional police force, which famously used it as a high-speed pursuit vehicle. The SD1 won European Car of the Year in 1977, and the Vitesse represented its finest hour, a genuine Grand Tourer dressed as a saloon. And yet, what followed would raise the bar considerably higher. Number 9. Jaguar XJ40. Unveiled in 1986 after nearly a decade of development, the Jaguar XJ40 was built at Browns Lane in Coventry and represented Jaguar's single most ambitious engineering gamble since the original XJ6 18 years earlier. The 3.6-litre twin-overhead camshaft straight-six engine was entirely new, producing 221 brake horsepower in its most potent form, and it gave the XJ40 a refinement and smoothness that its German rivals simply could not match at any price. Driving it was an experience in composed authority, effortless power, a ride quality of almost supernatural softness, and steering that remained precise and communicative. The interior combined Connolly leather, real burr walnut, and deep wool carpets in a cabin that felt genuinely bespoke. Its buyers ranged from senior executives to members of parliament, and the car's long waiting lists spoke to the strength of Jaguar's appeal at the time. Despite early reliability concerns, the XJ40 defined the Jaguar identity for a generation. But the car that preceded it in the showroom was something even more special. Number 8. Rover 800 Sterling. The Rover 800 Sterling, launched in 1986 and assembled at Cowley in Oxford, was the most ambitious car that British Leyland, by then rebranded as the Rover Group, had ever attempted in the executive sector. Built on a joint platform developed alongside Honda, it was powered in its finest form by a 2.7-litre Honda V6 engine producing 173 brake horsepower, mated to a remarkably sophisticated suspension system that gave it a ride quality well above its price point. Behind the wheel, the Sterling felt composed and effortlessly smooth, genuinely competitive with the BMW 5 Series and the Mercedes W124 that were dominating corporate car parks across Britain. The cabin was trimmed in soft leather and real wood, and in sterling specification the attention to detail was meticulous. Its target buyers were board-level executives and senior civil servants seeking something distinctly British, and for a time it sold well in both the United Kingdom and the United States. It deserved better than the fate it ultimately received. But the next entry had no such problems with its reputation. Number 7. Daimler Double Six Series III. The Daimler Double Six Series III, produced at Jaguar's Browns Lane plant from 1981 onwards, occupied a position in the British social hierarchy that no other car could quite replicate. Beneath its elongated, classically proportioned body sat Jaguar's legendary 5.3-litre V12 engine, the same unit that powered Le Mans racing cars, producing 299 brake horsepower and delivering power with an uncanny, turbine-like smoothness that made the phrase effortless feel genuinely inadequate. On the road it was an experience unlike any other, long, low, and serene, gliding over imperfections with complete disdain. The interior was finished to a standard that rivaled coach-built Continentals, with hand-stitched Connolly hides, veneered picnic tables for rear passengers, and a hush inside the cabin so profound that the clock was the loudest sound you would hear. Its buyers were captains of industry, senior members of the legal profession, and distinguished members of the aristocracy. As the luxury version of the finest saloon Jaguar ever built, the Double Six remains one of the great automotive achievements of the 20th century. Yet the next car on this list operated in a different stratosphere entirely. Number 6. Bentley Mulsanne. Introduced in 1980 and hand-built at Bentley's Crewe factory, the Bentley Mulsanne announced itself as the most serious luxury saloon that Britain had produced since the great coach-built cars of the pre-war era. Sharing its platform with the Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit, but distinguished by a sportier character and a more driver-focused philosophy, the Mulsanne was powered by the legendary 6.75-litre overhead valve V8 engine, a unit so torque-rich and so refined that its power output was listed simply as sufficient. Driving it required no effort whatsoever. The car simply absorbed distance with a serene, rolling authority that felt almost geological in its calmness. The interior was a masterpiece of traditional British craftsmanship, acres of hand-stitched hide, clock-faced instruments set in deeply grained wood veneer, and a formality of presentation that spoke of Crewe's workshop culture rather than any production line. Its buyers were among the wealthiest people in Britain and the world, industrialists, financiers, heads of state, and those for whom the very idea of compromise was alien. The Mulsanne was not merely a car. It was a declaration. And yet the top 5 cars represented an entirely different level of British engineering ambition. Number 5. Bentley Turbo R. Revealed in 1985 and built, as always, by hand in Crewe, the Bentley Turbo R was a car that fundamentally changed the perception of what a British luxury saloon could be. Taking the established Mulsanne body and chassis and adding a turbocharger to the 6.75-litre V8, Bentley's engineers, led by the determined John Stevenson, produced a machine of quite astonishing performance. With 298 brake horsepower and a vast wall of torque available almost from idle, the Turbo R could accelerate from rest to 60 miles per hour in around 6.7 seconds, genuinely supercar territory for a car weighing over 2.5 tons. But what separated the Turbo R from the standard Mulsanne was its suspension, considerably firmer, with anti-roll bars front and rear. It turned with a precision and body control that would embarrass much more sporting machinery. The interior retained every element of Crewe's legendary craftsmanship, the hide, the veneer, the inlaid carpets, but now carried an unmistakable sense of suppressed aggression. Rock stars, Arab royalty, successful financiers, and anyone who understood that genuine performance and absolute luxury were not mutually exclusive, these were its people. The Turbo R gave Bentley its own identity for the first time in a generation. And that, historically, was everything. Number 4. Aston Martin Lagonda Series II. The Aston Martin Lagonda, produced at Newport Pagnell in Buckinghamshire in the most exquisitely individual fashion imaginable, was without question the most audacious luxury saloon that any British manufacturer had ever dared to build. Styled by William Townes in a razor-edged, horizontal wedge shape of absolute dramatic conviction, it deployed an all-digital instrument panel controlled by touch-sensitive switches at a time when most cars still use simple analog dials, technology so advanced that early examples spent more time being repaired than driven. Beneath the extraordinary skin sat Aston Martin's hand-built 5.3-litre DOC V8 engine producing approximately 280 brake horsepower, driving through a 3-speed Chrysler Torqueflite automatic gearbox. In motion, it was a deeply idiosyncratic experience, powerful, refined, and possessed of a road presence so theatrical it defied rational description. The interior was trimmed to individual customer specification, with Connolly leather in any color imaginable, Wilton carpets, and a dashboard of futuristic theater that had no equivalent anywhere on Earth. Fewer than 650 were built across the entire production run, and its buyers, Middle Eastern royalty, international celebrities, and those who regarded the Bentley as insufficiently dramatic, understood they were commissioning something unique. No car before or since has looked quite so defiantly certain of itself. Number 3. Jaguar XJ6 Series III. By the time the Series III XJ6 entered the decade of the 1980s, it was already a legend. Designed under the personal supervision of Jaguar's founder Sir William Lyons and refined at Browns Lane in Coventry to a standard of completion that the company's subsequent owners would struggle to maintain, the Series III represented the ultimate expression of everything Lyons had built over 4 decades of uncompromising pursuit of elegance. The 4.2-litre XK twin-cam straight-six engine, one of the most celebrated units in automotive history, produced 176 brake horsepower and delivered its power through a silken refinement that remained unmatched. On the road, the Series III moved with a quality of ride that independent testers consistently described as the finest in the world, not the stiffest, not the most agile, but the most deeply, sensuously comfortable. The interior, trimmed in Connolly leather and Santos Palisander veneer, was a room of quite exceptional beauty. Its buyers included heads of government, company chairmen, and distinguished figures from every profession, people who understood what a genuinely great car looked and felt like. When production finally ended in 1987, many observers believed that nothing would ever replace it. On the evidence of what came after, they may have been right. Number 2. Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit. Launched at the Paris Motor Show in October 1980 and built with painstaking care at the Rolls-Royce factory in Crewe, the Silver Spirit arrived as the definitive statement of everything that British luxury manufacturing stood for at the close of the 20th century's most turbulent industrial era. Powered by the immortal 6.75-litre aluminium V8 engine, its power output famously described as adequate, the Silver Spirit moved through the world with a serenity that no driver of a modern car could fully prepare themselves for. The self-leveling hydraulic suspension, developed from the system used on the outgoing Silver Shadow, absorbed road surfaces with a completeness that felt almost supernatural. Inside, every surface that could be covered in hand-stitched Connolly leather was covered in it. Every piece of wood veneer was individually selected from Rolls-Royce's own timber store, matched by eye, and polished by hand. The instrument panel, the door furniture, the deep pile Wilton carpet, every element spoke of a tradition of excellence that stretched back to the beginning of the century. Its buyers were quite simply the most powerful and most prosperous people in the world. Heads of state, royalty, industrial dynasties, and the very summit of global wealth. And yet, extraordinary as the Silver Spirit undeniably was, there remains one British luxury saloon from this era that stands above even this. Number 1. Jaguar XJ12 Series III. There are cars that are brilliant. There are cars that are memorable. And then, very rarely, there are cars that are genuinely irreplaceable, machines that capture a particular confluence of engineering, aesthetics, and cultural moment so completely that nothing made before or since can honestly claim to surpass them. The Jaguar XJ12 Series III is that car. Built at Browns Lane in Coventry and powered by Jaguar's magnificent 5.3-litre V12 engine, the only production V12 in the world at the time, it produced 299 brake horsepower and delivered it with a smoothness so absolute, so utterly devoid of mechanical sensation, that early road testers struggled to find the vocabulary to describe what they were experiencing. In independent testing, the XJ12 Series III consistently recorded the lowest cabin noise levels of any production car in the world. Its ride quality, even by the standards of Rolls-Royce, was considered extraordinary. The interior, trimmed to a quality that Jaguar's rivals freely admitted they could not match at twice the price, combined the finest British materials with a sense of aesthetic proportion that was quite simply beautiful. Senior statesmen, captains of industry, distinguished members of the artistic community, and those who simply recognized true greatness when they encountered it, all of them chose this car. In an era when British industry was fighting for its survival, Jaguar built the finest saloon car in the world. And 50 years on, no one has done it better since. What these 10 cars represent, taken together, is something that the modern automotive world finds genuinely difficult to replicate. They were products of an era when the people building them understood, at the deepest level, that a great car is not merely a collection of engineering solutions. It is an expression of cultural confidence. Each of these saloons carried within it the accumulated knowledge of craftsmen and engineers who had spent their entire working lives in pursuit of a single, clearly understood standard of excellence. The leather came from the finest hides. The wood was selected and matched by human eyes. The engineering decisions were made by people who drove the cars themselves and refused to accept anything that fell short of their own exacting expectations. That kind of ambition, patient, proud, and stubbornly resistant to compromise, was what made 1980s British luxury motoring unique. And that, perhaps more than anything else, is what the modern world has genuinely lost. If you enjoyed this journey through one of the greatest chapters in British motoring history, then do make sure you subscribe to Britain Rewind. We have many more stories like this one waiting for you, and every single one of them is worth your time. Hit the like button if this video brought back some memories, and share it with anyone who appreciates great British cars. And now, the most important question of all, which of these 10 extraordinary machines would you most want to drive today? We read every single one.